going straight from there to situational awareness. That's a skill that's taught and learned. It isn't common sense or a catch-all phrase. Now, when you define situational awareness and you realize that, hey, there are instincts that all people have. Like you were saying, there was just something about that guy in the parking lot. There was, I really did, for lack of a better term, I saw this coming. Yeah. How do you just where is the distinction made between, wow, I really knew what I was doing, to being in a healthy way situationally aware?
Could we also define the difference between your gut feeling, women's intuition, and actual situational awareness?
Right.
Okay, so like in my mind, and I would like to talk about it, I think that there's a huge difference between the two.
Right.
Like one is an innate, and it can be honed. It's something that children have like in droves. Like if you were to hone that in children, Gavin de Becker talks about it. It's gift of fear, protecting the gift. The idea that you are society usually pushes it right out of them. Like, I'm scared. I don't like that man. It doesn't matter. He's a friend. You're going to meet him. Yeah, give him a hug, all this other stuff. Like, that's how you push it right out of them. And in turn, what happens is you lose contact with what that feeling is. If you're religious, then it is the Holy Spirit. Like, whatever it is that's different than what the majority of us at the table speak on as situational awareness. So I think it's close, but they should be.
They're connected, but they're not the same.
Well, the one's explainable and one's not.
Yeah.
It's like we do it with our kids, actually. We actually honor that with our son. Like he has certain people that he does not like. There's no, like, I've known him for years. Yeah, good people. Boy doesn't like him. He's just over 3. But no, we honor it though. We don't force him to like, hey, no, go say hi, go do it. No. Yeah. We actually don't have those people come around him. We actually keep a pretty hard line in the sand over that, because I want him to like trust that. Like there's something there. And in the end, it could be something that I just don't know.
Yeah. Well, it could be nothing at all.
Yeah. Or it could be nothing at all, but I don't want him to like disregard that.
Yeah, and feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, kids, dogs, especially the horses.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, their instinct, their personal, their character judge. Yeah, if a horse doesn't like you, if a dog doesn't like you, it's probably there's something about that. It's not just your hat.
But the funny thing about that is, I think people are sometimes quick more like they'll pay attention to their dog not liking somebody, but then they'll ignore it in themselves. Man, my dog really just doesn't like them. But then they'll find ways, and I think DeBecker talks about some of this stuff. They'll find ways to overlook it or dismiss it in themselves.
Yeah.
Like, and again, it is different. It's an innate thing, and I do think that we've been taught to kind of suppress that stuff. And I think the further we've gotten from having to literally fight to survive on a daily basis, the less that has become part of us, because we don't have to look around our shoulder to make sure a saber-toothed tiger is not going to jump on our back every day or whatever, So I do think that there's been a societal suppression of that, but also like an evolutionary kind of suppression of it.
Yeah. And just from personal experience, like I've had scenarios where somebody's running from me and shooting at me. I had very little emotional response to that. I didn't feel like I was in a lot of danger. And then I've made just regular contacts where I'm just standing talking to somebody on a traffic stop, and my heart rate's at like 150, and I was like, and they're sitting there with their hands on the steering wheel, and I'm like, something's wrong here, and I can't figure it out. And I think the unknown like bothers me more than the known. Like, okay, you're shooting at me, that's a problem, I have solutions.
Yeah.
I don't know what's happening, but I feel really bad about this scenario right now. It's like the worst feeling in the world.
Well, and the overlap too might be that there is something going on, and you haven't consciously made that. Oh yeah, he was shifting his weight, or he was clenching it. But you haven't made that connection.
And I always walk away, even if I never figure it out. I always walk away thinking there was something there that one of my senses was picking up that wasn't right in that scenario.
I always try to ask myself, like, what am I looking at?
Right.
Right. When I can't identify it, like it's either one, I don't actually know what I'm looking at, or I don't have the verbiage to tell myself.
Right.
Yeah. Like if you see something that's completely like you've never seen before, like it's hard to explain it.
Right.
Like the first person you have to tell is yourself.
Yeah.
Which is like a weird mental thing,
Yeah. I see situational awareness as is taught in like most self-defense type training as a learned skill, a practiced skill.
Recognized.
Something where you go out of your way to be more aware of what's going on around you. You plan ahead when you pull in a parking lot before you ever turn off the street. You're scanning the parking lot for things that we talked about a couple of days ago. Things that are outside the norm for that area. And that's going to change from area to area.
I think a lot of times in our circles, though, it's like this tagline. It's this throwaway term, and you say it, and everybody's supposed to just know what you mean.
Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've been given briefs to multiple air crews and had members of air crews. They'll just be like, "What's this SA thing you keep talking about? These are air crews."
Yeah.
Like, situational awareness. Oh, well, we just say situational awareness. Like, yeah, buddy. Okay.
Yeah.
Acronyms. Yeah, but these are military air crews, and it may be that's a further step in recognizing.
I think people in our industry either make the mistake of assuming that people know what that means, or people in our industry don't really know what that means, and they say it as a thing to make them sound like they know something that they don't really understand themselves.
I had a conversation not too long ago with a friend of mine who's an instructor for law enforcement up in Ohio. And we actually were talking about the female in a bar situation. Female goes into a bar and she just has that hunch, that intuition, like this guy is like maybe following her, and it's that weird hunch, and then maybe something bad happens. But then there was the second scenario of that female trained. She already noticed that the guy was following her there, knew what car he was in, then went inside, recognized that situation right away, and was able to go to security member or police and things like that. And those are two very different things. And it's like, how do you institutionalize that training of that situational awareness? How do you get someone that should feel 100% safe going out with their friends, whether it's male or female, and then try to kind of, make that the same across the board? Because you got all these people on YouTube that are like subject matter experts that say this is the best way, this is how you do this. But at the end of the day, is that really,
I think one thing is give them permission. Because I think we're conditioned to try to, ignore these things and pretend it's not real and I'm overreacting or whatever. Give them permission. Look, something doesn't feel right. You're better off to address it and be wrong than to ignore it and be right.
100%.
Well, in society, like you're saying, give it permission. Society rallies against situational awareness and acknowledging those feelings. Right. The few times I've mentioned, I went to the bank around like 1 PM, and that's my normal time. There's usually 4 or 5 cars in the parking lot, and I pull up and there were none. And so I was like a little put off, and I was kind of, I walked in, but I was paying attention to a lot of what was going on around me before I got myself all the way in the door, and who knows what was going on. And I got called paranoid. I'm like, no, I'm here weekly at this time, and there are a lot of cars in the parking lot. There's something different. Like, I'm paying attention. So yeah, you're paranoid. You're reading into things. Yeah, and so it's
don't be too concerned with what other people think about like how you think they're thinking about you.
No, in that scenario. That's what I'm saying in terms of situational awareness. It makes it even harder to bring that about in people because
that stigma of
I don't want to be the asshole or whatever.
And not only that, but that stigma that comes from how many military movies are out there right now. PTSD, the guy goes off his rocker, kills friends, things of that nature. So especially for the guys in the room that have been overseas, things of that nature, it's like, oh well, nah, man, you just got back. Just chill out. You're just kind of paranoid right now. Well, no, there's a serious problem going on, and I'm not okay with this. We need to go. Right. I discuss that, with my girlfriend all the time. Whenever we first got together, certain scenarios or other things, and I'd be like, hey, if I'm just like, I want to go, we need to just go. And like you said, hey, it's easier to just leave, get out of the situation than what could possibly happen later on if you don't listen to that inner, feeling.
Well, I have that conversation with friends of mine that don't train, where they understand that, like, I might park somewhere and we start working and I'm like, hey, we need to go get back in the car. Like, I promise we're going to have a fun night. I'm going to find somewhere else or whatever. And they realize that they're not paying as much attention as I am.
I had to introduce my wife to a concept that's thrown around with like my friends. It's there are no victims, only volunteers. The idea being, hey, whatever situation I find myself in, it's my fault. Doesn't necessarily mean I deserve it, but it's my fault. Like my actions alone put me there. Like sitting in this chair right now, this is a little like esoteric, but if meteor made it through the roof and hit me in the head, it's my fault. Like I agreed to be here and sit in this chair at this moment. And the whole purpose behind that is just to take personal responsibility of what I do day to day, where I go and where I put myself, and to try to remove the ability for me to blame someone else for that.
Yeah.
Well, and then that puts it in your power to not sit in that chair or.
Yes.
You have a choice.
Which
Now I'm talking about
I just hope it's a really small meteor. That's what I'm thinking.
Amber alerts are going off. Like, oh,
I would have thought that you'd be like, I was going to sit there. And then he made you sit over there.
And then the meteor
he's the
hits
one
here.
that hit him.
But going back to your bank scenario, you just recognized something that was abnormal for that situation.
Yeah.
And you were more aware of your surroundings. You were, call it paranoid, call it whatever you want to call it. But if you're paranoid or more alert and you're wrong, there's no penalty for
penalty.
Right.
Yeah.
If you have that feeling and you don't
Dismiss it. Yeah.
at least expand your awareness and like question it a little bit, there could be a huge penalty.
Well, and I think people that don't live like we live, that don't immerse themselves in our worlds, think that we're constantly just like crazy.
Right.
And it's not that. It's like when you first learn to drive. When you first learn to drive, you're like this.
Right.
You're tunnel vision. You're not messing with things. You're 10 and 2, and you're doing the speed limit and whatever. And then eventually you're going 80 miles an hour. You're doing multiple high level things at the same time, and you don't even remember the ride.
Yeah.
You're just doing these things because you've done it enough that it's just part of who you.
Right.
I think this done correctly, this becomes the same. I don't walk into a restaurant and think, okay, I have to sit here. I just know where I'm going to go, and I know the things that I'm paying attention to without even. I'm not like being purposeful about it. It's just it's part of who I am now.
Right, but and that's what you're talking about, doing it properly. Going back to your statement on they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about. They are regurgitating something that sounded cool, or they received an answer to it, and in turn they never deep dive that information, and that information is being passed on as a catch-all. And the thing is that you never actually went to that class. You don't understand, like, just for example, person says, whenever I go to a restaurant, I try to place my back up against the wall so I can see all exits. Congratulations. Like, you're going to have your back to the wall when the person comes in, and you're going to be completely oblivious to anything going on, because that's not the entirety of that class. That is like the 4th bullet point on a 20 bullet point class.
And the easiest part of it.
It's the easiest part of it, right? And it's like, did you actually look around to make sure that there is some sort of assessment of the ratio of families to single people that are in the chairs, male type of meeting to male female, and then are you actually paying attention to when they start standing up and switching out, and are you paying attention to the wait staff? Are you actually, like, all of these different things are like, when you hear about that type of a brief and you go through it, you're like, geez, that's so much. They flash these things up on these screens, and they're like, you have 10 seconds, look at them, boom. And then it's like, now write down everything. And it's like, did you notice that, the baby was wearing an orange, not a diaper? And you're just like, no. But the thing is that those kinds of classes teach you that you are slowly absorbing information, and you do it on a regular basis. And at some point, your brain starts doing it naturally, right? And so what happens is you don't have to think about doing that, right? What happens is you start just assessing those areas naturally. But you still, the whole point of it is, you still have to be taught how to do it. You can't just say situational awareness. And the level of situational awareness is based off of your comfortability and familiarity in that scenario or that area. And it will increase dramatically when bad things happen, because directly afterwards, you have all of these pre-contact cues that you had recognized, but you didn't assess a reason to, that afterwards you're like, just like everything that you said, like every single person there is going to, if they did it right, which they probably didn't, but if they do it right, they're going to go, yeah, that shift in weight, that, you know, that the fact that he was like looking behind me when he was talking to me, or, you know, he was circling from right to left, or, you know, he kept looking down at where my hands were. Yeah. You know, the moment that I shook his hand, and instead of, you know, standing directly in front of me like a normal person, he shifted his weight so that one leg was back, you know. It's not funny, but like I watched a cop, a dash cam video of a cop had pulled over this pickup truck, and the guy gets out, and he gets out with a beer in his hand. Just like gets pulled over, cop gets out, walks up towards him. Before he actually gets to the driver's side door, the guy had opened the door up, stood up. He's like a giant, and he has a beer in his hand. And he goes, "I'm not going to jail." And then the cop goes, "Sir, I need you to turn around and give me your arms, and I'm going to have to put these cuffs on you." And he gets really close to him. He's just like standing like really close to him. And the guy goes, "I'm not going to jail." He goes, "Sir, I need you to," and he puts the beer can on the top of his pickup truck. And he goes, "I'm not going to jail." And then the guy goes, "Sir, please." Now his hands are down the whole time, and he's really close to that guy. And then the guy, he had long sleeves on. He takes his sleeves and he rolls them up. And he goes, "I'm not going to jail." And once again, and then he steps back and he goes, "I'm not going to jail." And he goes, "Sir," bam, and he hits him. Right. There was so many pre-contact cues.
May as well have had a guy behind him with 2 cars.
Yeah, you know, and it's, you know, and it's like, dude, like, you can sit there and be like, "Oh, that's situational awareness." But for whatever reason, it wasn't registering to that cop that all of those actions were going to lead up to what everyone here was like. I read that when he got out of the vehicle before he even showed up. But the thing is that that's a learned thing. That's a learned environment. You have to pass that on, and you cannot use it as a fault, right? So like if somebody gets into a bad scenario and you're like, "Well, isn't that common sense?" Yeah, to you. Because you obviously had life experiences that lent to the fact that you could pick that up well in advance. But they are either naive or held in their little bubble or do whatever. It's not a catch-all. It is a learned thing.
Yeah, I think that goes back to that, like what you were saying, the paranoid thing of trying to preface this enough to be like, you know what, you can do situational awareness a little bit and keep practicing this. The Kim's games, you know, that's a great thing. But also, you know, I have some friends that are more junior, and they'll try to do that, and then I'll be talking to them like what you said, and they're like, they can't multitask. They're off in la la land, and like, "I'm watching this dude at the door. Wait, what did you say?" And then they're like, "Here comes my spaghetti. Fuck, I've had my steak knife ready this whole time for this, you know, assault." And it's like you got to find that happy medium, you know. And then also a lot of us that have quite a bit of experience with this, expecting other civilians or our loved ones to have the same level that we are. And, you know, I try to tell people, like, I don't expect you to be at that level, but also I want them to respect my level. And that was kind of an issue with our relationship in the beginning. Was she was like, "Why the fuck are you doing all this stuff?" And it was like, I try to explain it, you just won't get it. And then I was like, wait, no, I really do need to explain this. And then I would just start picking away little clues each time. Hey, you know, I just noticed this. This is why I'm acting this way. This is why we need to go, etc. And then by the time we get outside, we were at a little dinner place, and then a fist fight's happening inside. I saw that coming. We shouldn't be here, you know, things like that.
Well, there's things you can teach that can help just your average person increase it. Vision plays a big role in situational awareness, whereas most people, if you're driving, you look 10 feet in front of your car, past, you know, just past the hood, so make sure your bumper's not hitting anything. Whereas if you go to like a motorcycle driving school, they tell you look 12 seconds ahead. When you first start doing that, that's tiring on your eyes to like, because your eyes naturally kind of focus down. You know, if you learn to do that. So I had a good FTO when I first started. I'd be driving through neighborhoods late at night. He'd be like, see that guy 3 blocks up walking east to west? I'm like, no, not at all. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know, and that's where that whole kind of vision thing started to come into play. There's a really good, there's different variations of it, but there's a really good YouTube video where, like, if you're focused on, like you said, when the spaghetti comes out, it's like focus is changed, like squirrel. You know?
Shiny.
But there's a good YouTube video where it's like guys in white uniforms, guys in black uniforms passing a basketball.
Yeah, the gorilla.
Yeah, and they're like, watch, and you completely miss this dancing gorilla coming through the video. He stops in the middle and beats his chest, and you know, so focus plays a big part in it too.
Driving is a good example. I believe in our interview we talked about using driving as an analogy of progressive learning, right? I want to wait till this conversation to bring this up. Like, it's a good example mainly because you learn in an environment that is readily available. So as you're a child, you obviously are in vehicles, you understand, you're starting to pick up how things are. And I understand kids are usually oblivious, but it's an environment that's familiar. Like there's no introduction to that world. Like that's how you transport yourselves, right? Then what happens is as you become an experienced driver, you realize that if I stay on the right side in the city and we're going 45 miles an hour and there's businesses on this side, the likelihood of me having to slam on my brakes because the person in front of me doesn't have the common courtesy to turn the turn signal on in advance is high. So I would want to go into the left lane during these areas. And as you drive more, it's almost common sense to you that that's what you're doing. And you're being situationally aware by perceiving that that's what's coming up and, going in. The thing I wanted to talk about was that's a good example because of how familiar people are with driving. Our world is not something where people have any access to. Like they are inside of it, but they don't know it. And the thing is that when you try to pass on knowledge to individuals, you're like, it's just all around you. Like, to be situationally aware, like, this is what I'm doing. And they're just like, I've been alive my whole life. And, the whole time you've been counting people and, positioning yourself to, be able to, reloading stations and all this other stuff. Like there's the thought that you are going to be able to pass on those lessons without creating drills, without, integrating it into your life. Like, how do you do that on a regular basis? Like we were talking about that yesterday. Like the way that I shake hands is very, very different than the majority of people. And what it does is it puts the person at a disadvantage. And it puts somebody that knows what they're doing on alert, like immediately. And the thing is that's why I do that. The way that you stand, usually if you have any background, is something that allows you to absorb some sort of impact or weight distribution. You don't stand square, like if you have a weapon, like all of these things are normal to us and we practice them every single time that we talk to someone. But the average person doesn't. You're talking about 2 arms length, right. Like what do you do when you can't do that? Well, you have a system for that. I know that, and the thing is that I do too. And what I pass on to women or my wife is completely different than what I pass on to a guy, and the thing is that all of that has to be understood. Like you can't just say those 2 words and expect for it to be practiced. Like you can list all these things and realize that, 3 months later, they're just as oblivious as they were the first time. Because it's not the same thing as driving. Like, as somebody drives more, well, I mean, with exceptions, they're better at it. Yeah. Like, they're safer at it, they're, and as someone lives their life, they don't become safer in this environment. They have to actually do that. And what you were talking about is introducing that to someone's life, like as a partner, I think it falls into our conversation of what makes someone want to deep dive in an environment like this, even though statistically there is a high likelihood that you don't need it in most scenarios. But if it is needed, you are a statistic.
Yeah.
Right? So like my father used to talk about this. He goes, everybody likes to play the statistics game of what are the chances of somebody actually attacking me with a knife, whatever, or what are the likelihood of somebody choking me as an attack. And it's like when somebody's throttling your favorite neck, you don't care about what the percentage was and the likelihood that out of 7 billion people, you were the one getting choked at that time. Somebody stabs you as you're walking out of Best Buy, you're not going to be going, what are the chances? What the astronomical percentage that this would actually happen? Like, you wouldn't care about that. You would care about the fact that the skill of defending against that knife probably would have been useful to you, at that moment.
She could tell you, we walk down the street, we walk down the sidewalk, and I'm constantly changing what side I'm on of her based on as the scenery, the dynamics change. I'm not like, you recognize where potential things could evolve and how they could go, and so if it makes more sense, I'll just to one side or the other, and we just keep going. Just say a word,
just personal with whoever on the other end.
No, I just don't trust people.
It's just you now have to reach around them.
Right. Let's chalk it up to that.
Yeah,
and it's easier with kids than a wife, because now you're dealing with an adult and an equal. And, kids, you're supposed to train them. You're supposed to teach them. It's hard sometimes to look at your wife and be like, "Hey, you're doing this wrong. You need to do it."
Well, a good example.
That doesn't end well.
Just a couple days ago, we were riding. We got awesome little electric Segway scooters. I put my kid in a backpack carrier with haul ass through my neighborhood.
Right.
It's funny, you might have seen it on my Facebook. But animals are a very big, threat. Pit bulls, things of that nature. I was attacked when I was young, drug around for a while, had a lot of PTSD and issues from dogs, and so we were just cruising down the hill, and I always carry. And boom, I saw a pit bull on the right side, just randomly by a trash can. And I mean, he was quite a way up, quite a few houses up. And I said, "Stop, turn around right now." Yeah. And she's like, "What?" I'm like, "Did you not hear me? Stop, turn around." Yeah. And we're going up to, she's like, "What?" She's so mad at me. And I was like, "Turn around." And then way down there, we saw a pit bull. And she's like, "Well, what if it was nice?" I'm like, "I don't like that. What if?" Well, you have your gun. Okay. So now I just maybe blew out my child's eardrums that's on the backpack carrier behind me.
Tried to shoot something on the run.
Yeah, on an electric scooter. Like, what's up, tonight, Fox 8 News, and he's TV on the Nest camera, like, Tactical Ninja takes out nice pit bull, and then they put up the nice picture when it was a puppy, not when it was trying to attack me and my dog.
It's on his back.
Yeah, it's like, hello,
And then they put the 10-year-old son that owned the dog.
Yeah, next to him, and it's like, okay, well, you're automatically
all for no
negligent.
reason.
Yeah.
Where you recognize there was a problem or a potential problem.
Yep.
And just
and the thing is, my neighborhood isn't that big. We're kind of out in the country, and so we went back home. I got in my truck and I drove over there, and I was like, I've never seen this dog before. And my buddy lives right next to them, and he has younger children. And I go over, and the dog is a couple houses down. And I go to that house and knock on the door. I'm like, "Is that your dog?" They're like, "No, it's been hanging out. It's actually kind of nice." And I'm like, "You didn't call animal control." And then so I called animal control. They came down. The dog was emaciated. They picked the dog up and took him. But who knows whether that dog was aggressive or not.
We had somebody come to our center just a couple weeks ago, and he showed us a cell phone video. He and his fiance were going to look at houses and go to look at this house out in the country. They get there. They pull up at the driveway. There's a deer in the yard. Deer's got a collar on. So what does the fiance do?
Oh, hey, deer.
Goes over to pet the deer. He's videoing on his cell phone. What does the deer do? Stands up on its back legs and starts. All of a sudden, the video goes dead because now he has to go save his fiance from this deer that's wearing a collar. Like those are things that talk about choices. Like you chose to go pet this random deer in a yard that you don't know.
It opens up so many questions I have for that individual. Like,
well, that
what
and
told
also
you that was right.
That's kind
was
of
wearing a collar.
a weird segue into a crappy topic of very recently there's been a lot of people who have been mugged or hurt in parks, men and women, depending on where they are. But it goes back to that choice. Should I or my girlfriend or my child be able to walk down the road at 4 or 5 in the morning? Absolutely.
Should
But that's
they?
not the
Yes.
that's not the
not
world
like,
that we're in. You know, if you go running, you know, in a national park or whatever, male, female, dark, whatever, you get attacked by a bear because you didn't have, you know, something to protect you. You get, you know, murdered because you didn't have something to protect you, or you just were in that bad situation. Unfortunately, you made that choice.
Yep.
You were there at that time. So
well, and doing it anyway because you should, even though it's dangerous.
yes,
Like that's not
And-
going to solve anything.
Yep. And then people defending that. Well, they should be able to do that.
Yeah, they
You
should.
are
That's
right.
not
It's
the
really
point.
cool.
of
That doesn't
things.
change the
Right.
world that
Yeah.
we're in.
Right.
Yeah.
There was a couple several years ago that decided they were just to prove that the world wasn't what people said it was. We're going to ride their bicycles across like Iraq and Syria.
Yeah.
Guess what happened to them?
That happens all the time.
They lived happily ever after.
It's
Together.
Department of State CRIF teams getting hit up right now.
Yeah.
Hey, go
Yeah.
get these people.
Nah, I think
Go get these
neither one of them made
bodies.
it. So.
Yeah.